The gavel cracks and the sound echoes like a gunshot. A man's life hangs in the balance. We trust our courts to be pillars of justice. But what happens when the judge himself is the criminal? What happens when the man in the black robe is a racist so consumed by hate that he'll plant evidence on a black man to secure a conviction? He's about to ruin the wrong man's life because that man isn't just a defendant. He's a federal agent and he's recording everything. The air in courtroom 3B of the Davidson County Courthouse was stale, thick with the smell of old wood polish and cheap coffee. It was Judge Arthur Donovan's domain, and he ruled it like a bitter king. Donovan, a man whose face seemed permanently set in a sneer of mild disappointment, looked down from his elevated bench. His eyes, the color of washed-out denim, scanned the defendant standing before him. The defendant was Marcus, just Marcus on the docket. He was a black man in his late 20s, dressed in an orange jumpsuit that did nothing to hide the powerful build of his shoulders. His face was calm, almost unnervingly so. Docket number 719B, the People versus Marcus Turner, the Claire droned. Charges are resisting arrest and assault on a peace officer. Not guilty on all charges, Your Honor, Marcus said. His voice was deep and steady, devoid of the fear Donovan was used to hearing. Donovan leaned forward, his spectacles slipping down his nose. Assault on a peace officer, Mr. Turner. A serious charge. Officer Peterson claims you broke his hand. Officer Peterson, Marcus stated, slipped on a wet sidewalk while trying to tackle me for fitting a description. I put my hands up and he fell. I never touched him. A likely story, Donovan scoffed, ignoring the young public defender Sarah Jenkins, who was frantically trying to interject. Sarah, barely 3 years out of law school and drowning in an impossible caseload, finally spoke. Your Honor, Mr. Turner has no prior offenses. The assault charge is clearly an overreach. The officer's own partner's report only mentions resisting. We believe Officer Peterson embellished his report after the fact. We ask for our release on recognizance. Donovan gave her a pitiless look. Do you know the conviction rate in my courtroom, Miss Jenkins? It's high. I don't tolerate attacks on law enforcement. He looked back at Marcus. This fitting a description. Were you by chance in the vicinity of the Mill Creek robberies? I was 2 miles away walking home from the bus stop, Marcus said. That's what they all say. Donovan murmured loud enough for the court reporter to catch. He shuffled his papers. He saw a black man. No job listed on the intake form. No permanent address. Transient, dangerous. In Donovan's mind, the case was already closed. I'm not letting a potential cop break her back on my streets. Bail is set at $100,000. Sarah gasped. Your Honor, for a resisting charge, he can't possibly. He can't. Then he shouldn't assault police officers, Donovan snapped. $100,000 cash or bond. Next case. He banged the gavel. As Deputy Miller, a stocky man with a face like a bulldog, grabbed Marcus's arm. Marcus looked directly at Judge Donovan. He didn't look scared. He looked interested. It was a look of pure analytical focus. Donovan felt a strange chill. He dismissed it as indignation. The arrogance of these people, he thought. Marcus was led from the courtroom into the holding pens. The moment the heavy steel door clanged shut, he sat on the cold bench and closed his eyes. The Marcus Turner persona melted away. Special Agent Marcus Thorne of the FBI's Public Corruption Unit began his assessment. The initial sting operation gavel was simple. Send in an undercover operative on a minor manufactured charge to see if the courthouse's bail bond system was crooked. They suspected kickbacks, but Judge Donovan hadn't taken the bait. He hadn't assigned a specific bondsman. Instead, he'd done something worse. He'd revealed a bias so profound, so hateful that the entire focus of the operation was about to shift. In the FBI van parked 2 blocks away, his team listened. He said, bail at $100,000. Agent Costa whispered, staring at the audio levels for resisting. He's not just biased, he's proud of it, said Agent Reynolds, the team lead. But we don't have enough. A racist judge setting high bail isn't a federal crime. It's just Tuesday in America. Marcus will stay in, Costa said. He'll process him through intake. No, Reynolds said. a grim look on his face. This judge, he's arrogant. Let's see how arrogant. Let's post the bond. We'll use a shell company. Let's see what Donovan does when this transient walks free. The plan was set. They would pay the bondsman a $10,000 premium, and Marcus would be out by morning. But in his chambers, Judge Donovan was stewing. He pulled up the file for Marcus Turner. He stared at the man's impassive mugshot. 100 grand. He knew the man couldn't pay it. He'd sit in county for 6 months just waiting for a trial. Then he'd be so desperate he'd take a plea for 5 years. That's how the system worked. That's how he made it work. He buzzed his Claire. Get me Otta Harrison on the phone. When the prosecutor picked up, Donovan didn't waste time. Harrison, that Turner case, the resisting charge is flimsy. Peterson's partner is waffling. I want you to find something better. I want this one to stick. Judge, Harrison sighed. I can't just invent a charge. I'm not asking you to invent it, Donovan said, his voice dropping to a silken, dangerous tone. I'm asking you to find it. This man assaulted an officer. He's a menace. Do your job. He hung up. He looked at the mug shot again. You will not look at me like that in my courtroom. He whispered to the photo. I'll make you pay. The next morning, Judge Donovan arrived at the courthouse to find a message on his desk. Marcus Turner had posted bond. Donovan stared at the note from the bail bondsman. Alpha Omega Shortity. It read. He'd never heard of them. He threw the note in the trash. The man had walked $100,000 just like that. The judge's face purpled. He felt defied. This Marcus Turner wasn't who he seemed. He was connected. He was, in Donovan's twisted worldview, an organized, high-level criminal. The kind he really hated. The kind who thought they were smarter than him. He slammed his office door, the thick oak rattling in its frame. He buzzed his intercom. Miller, my chambers. Now, Deputy Bailiff Henry Miller didn't just work for the courthouse. He worked for Judge Donovan. They had come up together. Miller, the failed cop. Donovan, the ambitious prosecutor. Miller had been Donovan's fixer for 20 years. A blunt instrument for a man who considered himself a surgeon. Miller entered, his bulldog face set in its usual sour expression. Problem, Judge. The Turner case from yesterday, Donovan said, pacing. He posted bond, Miller grunted. Rich for a bum. He's not a bum, Donovan spat. He's something else. And I'm not letting him walk. The assault charge is going to fall apart. Peterson's partner is recanting, says Peterson tripped. He's a coward. Miller stood silently. He knew what this prelude meant. We need something that sticks, Donovan said, stopping his pacing. He walked to a locked filing cabinet in the corner, one that didn't match the rest of his office furniture. He opened it with a small private key. Inside were not files. Inside were dozens of small plastic evidence bags. Some contained syringes, others small glass vials, and many held baggies of white powder. It was a dragon's hoard of confiscated, lost, and mishandled evidence from a decade's worth of cases. His insurance for difficult situations. He pulled out a small bag containing about 20 g of cocaine. This was from the State versus Morales case. Case was tossed on a technicality. The evidence was supposed to be destroyed. Miller's eyes lit up with a sick understanding. You want to? The defendant's property bag is still in courthouse holding, Donovan said, his voice a low hiss. He was processed, but his bond posted before he was transferred to county. His personal effects, his wallet, his keys, his phone. They're all in a locker downstairs. You want me to drop this in his bag? Miller stated. It wasn't a question. I want you to find this in his bag. Donovan corrected him, his eyes like ice. You were doing a routine inventory of the holding lockers, and you noticed a pungent odor. You opened the bag to verify the contents against the manifest, and this poison fell out. Miller nodded, a slow, greasy smile spreading across his face. Pungent odor. Got it. But Judge, the booking officers searched him. They inventoried his stuff. Their report will say the bag was clean. The booking officers are lazy, Donovan said dismissively. They missed it. It was tucked in a lining. A simple mistake. Your diligent recheck is what caught it. You're a hero, Miller. You stopped a major trafficker. He handed the baggie to Miller. Miller palmed it, his thick fingers closing around the plastic. And Turner, he bonded out. He's probably on his way to the courthouse right now to pick up his effects. The bondsman said 10 a.m. It's 9:30. Donovan looked at his watch. When he arrives, he won't be picking up his property. He'll be getting a new set of bracelets. And this time there will be no bail. And the public defender, Jenkins, she'll scream. Let her scream. Donovan sneered. It's her word against a decorated bailiff and a sitting judge. I'll deny the motion to suppress from the bench. I'll fast-track the trial. By Christmas, Mr. Turner will be an inmate at the state penitentiary where he belongs. Miller nodded. I'll take care of it. He left the chambers. Judge Donovan sat back in his chair, straightening his robes. He felt the familiar, satisfying click of the world reordering itself to his liking. Justice, he thought, was about maintaining order, and he was the only one with the strength to do it. Down in the property room, Miller moved with practiced ease. He had the keys. He knew the camera blind spots. He found the locker marked Turner M. He opened the sealed paper bag containing Marcus' belongings. Inside were a cheap wallet, a single key, a pack of gum, and a pair of dark sunglasses. Miller sneered. He unzipped the inner lining of the paper-thin windbreaker Marcus had been wearing, shoved the baggie deep inside, and zipped it back up. He then resealed the main property bag. He walked to the clerk's window. I'm doing a spot check on holding property. That Turner file, pull it. 20 minutes later, Marcus Thorne walked into the courthouse, dressed in the civilian clothes his team had stashed for him. He approached the property window. Here to collect for Marcus Turner, he said. The Claire, a young woman, looked up. Then her eyes went wide. Oh, sir, could you wait right here? Marcus felt the shift instantly. The air was charged. From the side door, Deputy Miller emerged, flanked by 2 sheriff's deputies. Marcus Turner? Miller barked. That's me. You're under arrest. For what? Marcus asked, keeping his voice level. I'm out on bond. For trafficking narcotics, Miller said, pulling out a new set of cuffs. He held up the bag of cocaine. We found this in your property. Slick. Looks like you're not just a cop beater. You're a poison peddler. Marcus looked at the bag. He looked at Miller and then he looked up directly at the security camera in the corner, a camera he knew Miller thought was a blind spot. He slowly, deliberately put his hands behind his back. I see, he said. You're going to want to get the judge. I think he'll want to be here for this. Miller laughed. Oh, he knows. He's the one who told us to be on the lookout for trash like you. As the cuffs clicked shut, Marcus' FBI handlers in the van were watching a different feed. Not the courthouse camera. They were watching the live feed from the pinhole camera hidden in Marcus' sunglasses, which was sitting right inside the secured property bag. They had a perfect high-definition audio and video recording of Deputy Miller's hands unzipping the bag, planting the drugs, and resealing it. In the van, Agent Costa hit the record button a second time, saving the file. Oh my God, she whispered. He did it. The judge's own bafe planted evidence on a federal agent. Agent Reynolds wasn't celebrating. His face was granite. Get the AUSA on the phone now. Tell him. Operation Gavel is dead. This is Operation Trojan Horse and we are in. The news of the second arrest hit Sarah Jenkins like a physical blow. She found Marcus back in the courthouse holding cell already in a fresh orange jumpsuit. They say you had 20 g of cocaine, she said, her voice trembling with disbelief. In your property bag. Marcus, please tell me this is a mistake. It's a mistake, Marcus said, his voice calm. But it's not the one you think. It's a plant, Sarah. A plant? Who? The booking officers. Think about it. Marcus said, steering her. Who has access? Who has motive? Who was so angry I made bail that he'd risk everything to keep me in? Sarah's blood ran cold. Judge Donovan. He's the head, Marcus said. But he'd have a hand. Who brought me in? Deputy Miller, Sarah breathed. He was the one who announced the find. Oh God. I want a suppression hearing, Marcus said. I want it fast. And I want Miller on the stand. I want Donovan presiding. Marcus, that's suicide, Sarah protested. If Donovan is in on it, he'll just deny the motion. He'll bury us. We need to file for a new judge, a change of venue. No, Marcus said, his tone final. I want him to rule on this. I want him to sit on that bench and listen to the lies he orchestrated. Can you do it? Sarah looked at the man in front of her. He wasn't scared. He was angry. It was a cold, controlled fury she'd never seen before. It scared her, but it also emboldened her. A suppression hearing? She nodded, her own resolve hardening. I'll file the motion by noon. I'll cite an impossible chain of custody. They'll have to respond. Good, Marcus said. And Sarah, don't worry about the trial. Just focus on this hearing. Focus on Deputy Miller and watch the judge. Watch every single move he makes. 2 days later, courtroom 3B was packed. Word had gotten out. The high bail copper was now a high-level drug trafficker. The local news had sent a sketch artist. Judge Donovan took the bench, his face a mask of solemnity. We are here for a motion to suppress in the case of the People versus Marcus Turner. Miss Jenkins, you may proceed. Sarah stood, her hands shaking, but her voice clear. Your Honor, the defense moves to suppress all evidence, namely a bag of narcotics found in my client's property bag. The discovery of this contraband is a legal and logistical impossibility. Mr. the Turner was searched by 2 booking officers. His property was inventoried and sealed. This discovery by Deputy Miller hours later in a secure area is a clear violation of chain of custody protocols and reeks of prosecutorial misconduct. Ada Harrison stood up red-faced. Objection. She's accusing an officer of the court. I am accusing no one. Sarah cut him off, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. I am stating facts, and to clarify those facts, the defense calls Deputy Henry Miller to the stand. A ripple went through the courtroom. You couldn't just call a bailiff in the same court. Donovan glared at Sarah. This is highly irregular, counselor. These are irregular circumstances, Your Honor, Sarah countered. Unless the prosecution wishes to stipulate to the facts of the discovery and risk having the evidence tossed on procedure alone. Harrison and Donovan were cornered. Fine. Donovan snapped. Mr. Miller, take the stand. Miller, looking uncomfortable in a suit instead of his uniform, was sworn in. Sarah approached the witness box. Deputy Miller, please describe to the court the events of 2 days ago leading to the second arrest of my client. Miller recited the story Donovan had fed him. I was conducting a routine inventory of the property lockers. I came to locker 14B assigned to the defendant. I noted a pungent chemical odor. A pungent odor? Sarah asked. From a sealed bag of cocaine inside a sealed property bag inside a locked steel locker. Miller flinched. It was strong. So strong that no one else smelled it. Not the 2 booking officers who stood inches from the property. Not the property, Clark. I'm just telling you what I smelled, Miller said, his voice rising. And what did you do? I followed procedure. I opened the locker and the property bag to verify the contents against the manifest. I discovered the narcotics tucked into the lining of the defendant's jacket. You opened a sealed evidence bag? Property bag? Miller corrected. A bag sealed by another officer without a warrant. Without a witness. I don't need a warrant, Miller yelled, looking to Donovan for help. This courthouse property. That's enough, counselor. Donovan interrupted, his voice a low growl. You're badgering the witness. I'm trying to understand how evidence magically appears in a secure locker, Your Honor, Sarah shot back. Are you accusing my bailiff of planting evidence, Miss Jenkins? Donovan asked, his voice deadly. Sarah felt her blood freeze. This was it, the moment of truth. She looked at Miller, sweating in the stand. She looked at Donovan, a predator on his throne. She looked at Marcus, who nodded at her just once. What I am saying, Your Honor, Sarah said, turning to face the judge directly, is that the chain of custody is irreparably broken. The testimony of this witness is self-serving and defies logic. There is no way this evidence can be admissible in a court of law. It's fruit of the poisonous tree, and the tree itself appears to be rooted right here in this courthouse. A collective gasp went through the gallery. Judge Donovan's face was no longer just purple. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He stood up, towering over the court. "This hearing is over," he roared. "Miss Jenkins, I am finding you in contempt. 10 days in the county lockup." "Your Honor," Ada Harrison yelped, shocked. "And as for this motion," Donovan spat, "it is denied wholly and completely. I find Deputy Miller's testimony to be credible, and I find your behavior, Counselor, to be despicable. The evidence stands. Mr. Turner will be tried for the full extent of the law." He looked at Marcus, a triumphant, hateful sneer on his face. "You should have taken the plea, son. Now you're facing 20 years. He banged his gavel. Court adjourned. "Deputies, take Miss Jenkins into custody." 2 officers moved toward a stunned Sarah. Miller was stepping down from the stand, a smug grin on his face. Marcus Thorne simply watched. He looked at his shaking, terrified public defender being grabbed. He looked at the smug baif. He looked at the triumphant racist judge. And in the van, Agent Reynolds turned to the lead OSA, Mark Sandler, who had been listening to the entire feed. "Now?" Reynolds asked. A USA Sandler, a man known for his icy calm, was visibly shaking with anger. "Oh yes." Now he picked up his phone, hit it. The moment Judge Donovan's gavel struck, the main doors of courtroom 3B burst open. It wasn't a tentative push. The heavy oak doors slammed against the walls, the sound cracking through the stunned silence like thunder. 3 men in dark blue suits with U.S. Marshal emblazoned in yellow on their tactical vests entered first. They fanned out, creating a perimeter. They were followed by 3 more people: Agent Reynolds, Agent Costa, and Assistant U.S. Attorney Mark Sandler. "What is the meaning of this?" Donovan bellowed from the bench, though the color was draining from his face. "This is my courtroom." "Not anymore," Sandler said, his voice cutting through the air. He walked directly to the center of the room, holding up a file. "Arthur Donovan, this proceeding is concluded. This courtroom is now a federal crime scene." "Insolence!" Donovan roared, though his voice wavered. "Deputies, arrest these men for disrupting a court proceeding." The 2 deputies holding Sarah Jenkins's arms looked at the U.S. Marshals, then at Donovan, then back at the Marshals. They froze, letting Sarah go. Deputy Miller, who had been halfway to the door, made a break for it. "Henry Miller," Agent Reynolds barked, his voice the command of a man who doesn't get argued with. One of the Marshals, moving with impossible speed, cut Miller off, spun him around, and slammed him against the wall. "You can't do this," Miller shrieked, his face pressed to the plaster. "Yes, we can," Agent Costa said, pulling out her own cuffs. "Henry Miller, you are under arrest for conspiracy to violate civil rights, possession with intent to distribute, and perjury." The courtroom exploded. The gallery was in chaos. The reporter was sketching furiously. Donovan was on his feet, his face a mottled, terrified white. "This is a travesty. A joke. On what grounds? On whose authority?" "On my authority," Sandler said, stepping up to the bar. "And on the authority of the United States Department of Justice." He looked at the Marshals. "Take him." 2 Marshals began to ascend the steps to the bench. "No," Donovan shrieked, backing away. "You can't. I am a judge. I am the law." "You are a judge," Sandler said. "Now you're a defendant. And as for the evidence," he gestured to the holding cell. A Marshal unlocked the door. Marcus Thorne walked out. He wasn't in an orange jumpsuit. He wasn't cuffed. He walked calmly to the center of the courtroom, brushing a piece of lint from his sleeve. Judge Donovan stared at him, his mouth opening and closing. You. Marcus looked up at the man who had tried to destroy him. "Me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his credentials. He flipped the leather wallet open. "Special Agent Marcus Thorne," he said, his voice clear and resonant, filling every corner of the room. "FBI, Operation GVR, scratch that. Operation Trojan Horse." Sarah Jenkins, now standing beside Ada Harrison, put her hand over her mouth. "Oh my God, the evidence." Marcus continued, his eyes locked on Donovan. "It's all right here. The initial approach, the absurd bail hearing, your illegal order to Ada Harrison to find something on me. It's all on audio. Audio? Donovan whispered, sinking into his high-backed chair. But you, Marcus said, pointing at Miller, who was now weeping as the marshal cuffed him. You were the real prize. You and your boss. He turned back to Donovan. You see, Judge, when you have a target, you put surveillance on them. Or if you're smart, you get them to put surveillance in their own secure room. Marcus looked at Agent Costa. Agent the display. Costa nodded to a tech by the door who wheeled in a large monitor. She plugged in a laptop. This, Marcus announced to the courtroom, is from a high-definition audiovisual pinhole camera. The one that was in my sunglasses, the sunglasses that were in my property bag. Costa hit play. The courtroom watched in horrified silence as the monitor played a first-person view from inside the property bag. They saw the bag unzip. They saw Deputy Miller's thick fingers. They heard his grunts, and they saw in perfect, undeniable clarity as he pulled the baggie of cocaine from his own pocket and shoved it into the lining of the jacket. A woman in the gallery screamed. Otta Harrison looked like he was going to be sick. That's a fake, Donovan stammered. That's CGI. It's a deep fake. It's been verified by the FBI forensics lab judge. A USA Sandler said, and it's corroborated by the audio from your chambers. The audio where you gave him the drugs. The drugs from the Morales case. Donovan stopped speaking. The fight was gone. He looked old and small and pathetic. A deflated costume in a judge's robe. Arthur Donovan, Sandler said, reading from the warrant. You are under arrest for conspiracy, fabrication of evidence, violation of 18 U.S. Code, Section 242. The deprivation of rights under color of law, and a dozen other charges will be adding by the end of the day. The marshals didn't wait. They took him, one on each arm, and pulled him from his chair. The man who had been a king just minutes before was now a prisoner. You can't, he whimpered as they pulled his arms behind his back. I'm a judge. You're a disgrace, Marcus Thorne said, his voice quiet. As Donovan was led out, his eyes met Marcus. The hatred in them was still there, but now it was diluted by pure abject terror. Marcus turned to Sarah Jenkins, who was staring at him wide-eyed. You're an FBI agent, she stammered. Yes, Mom, Marcus said. And you let him find me in contempt? You were going to let them take me to jail? Marcus's expression softened. My team was in the hall, Miss Jenkins. Those deputies would have never gotten you past the doors. But I needed you to do what you did. I needed you to fight. You're a hell of a lawyer. He turned to Asa Sandler. This courtroom is secure. Let's start processing the files. I have a feeling Judge Donovan's insurance cabinet is just the beginning. The arrest of a sitting judge is not a quiet affair. The fall of Judge Arthur Donovan was an explosion. The FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office didn't just arrest Donovan and Miller. They seized 2 decades' worth of records from the Davidson County Courthouse. The insurance cabinet in Donovan's chambers was a treasure trove of corruption. It turned out Donovan wasn't just planting evidence on people he didn't like. He was running a massive extortion racket. He would target defendants he knew had some money, small business owners, middle-class families. He'd have Miller or another corrupt deputy plant minor contraband. Then Donovan's preferred and crooked defense attorney, a man named Lawrence Beck, would approach the family. Judge Donovan is a hard man, Beck would say, but I can make this go away for a price. The money would be paid and Beck and Donovan would split it. The charges would be miraculously dropped on a technicality. The Marcus Turner case was different. It wasn't about money. It was about hate. Donovan saw a black man who defied him, and he skipped the extortion part and went straight to destruction. It was this act of pure, unadulterated racism that proved to be his undoing. Deputy Miller, facing 30 years in federal prison, began to sing. He sang a song of 20 years of corruption, bribes, and planted evidence. He gave up names, dates, and cases. He implicated Lawrence Beck. He implicated 2 other deputies. He implicated Ada Harrison, not as a co-conspirator, but as a man who knew when to look away, which was a crime in itself. Harrison was disbarred. The biggest bombshell Miller dropped, however, was about the resisting arrest charge that started it all. Officer Peterson, the cop who claimed Marcus broke his hand, was Donovan's nephew. The entire fitting a description stop, the escalation, the assault. It was a setup from the word go. Donovan had been using his nephew as a street-level enforcer, targeting people in neighborhoods he wanted to cleanse for his developer friends. The FBI had started by pulling a thread and had unraveled the entire rotten tapestry of the county's legal system. Sarah Jenkins was for a time overwhelmed. The young, idealistic public defender had been a pawn in a game she couldn't even see. But when a USA Mark Sandler offered her a job in the U.S. Attorney's Office, assigned specifically to the Donovan case review, she took it. She wasn't a pawn anymore. She was a queen, and she was furious. She became the lead investigator in charge of reviewing every single one of Donovan's convictions. It was a Herculean task, and it was heartbreaking. She found file after file of men, mostly black and Latino, who had been railroaded, who had taken deal of a lifetime, pleas for 10 years to avoid a 30-year sentence on planted evidence. The media circus was relentless. The judge of shame, one headline screamed. Donovan's lair, cocaine and corruption, read another. The trial of Arthur Donovan was swift. It wasn't a trial. It was a formality. With the video from Marcus's glasses, the audio from his chambers, and the testimony of Henry Miller, the defense had nothing to offer. Donovan, stripped of his power, his robes, and his dignity, sat in a suit that was now too large for him. He had aged 20 years in 2 months. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a trembling, pallid fear. He tried one last time. He took the stand in his own defense, claiming he was set up, that the deep state FBI had framed him. On cross-examination, Asa Sandler let him talk for 10 minutes, digging his own grave. Then Sandler simply walked to the monitor and played the video from Marcus' sunglasses again. Special Agent Thorne's glasses, Mr. Donovan, were they part of the deep state? Was the pinhole camera a political operative? Donovan's defense rested. The jury was out for 45 minutes. Guilty on all 47 counts. The sentencing hearing was set. The federal courthouse, a modern glass and steel building, was chosen specifically to break from the dark wood and corruption of Donovan's old domain. The sentencing judge assigned to the case was a surprise to no one. Chief Judge Harriet Grant. Judge Grant was a legend, a black woman who had started her career as a civil rights lawyer in the Deep South. She had faced men like Donovan her entire life. She was known for her brilliant legal mind and her absolute intolerance for injustice. Donovan was wheeled into the courtroom in a wheelchair. His lawyers claimed he was too willed to stand. Judge Grant watched him, her face impassive. The prosecution, led by Sandler and assisted by Sarah Jenkins, asked for the maximum life in prison. Mr. Donovan, Sarah said, making the closing statement for the prosecution, did not just break the law. He was the law, and he twisted it, poisoned it, and used it as a weapon against the very people he swore an oath to protect. He built a kingdom of lies, and he populated his dungeons with the poor, the marginalized, and the people whose skin color he did not approve of. He is not just a criminal. He is a walking, breathing constitutional crisis. Then it was Donovan's turn to speak. His lawyer, a court-appointed federal defender, stood. My client Arthur Donovan is a broken man. He is 68 years old. He has a heart condition. A life sentence is a death sentence. We ask for mercy for the time he has already served. The courtroom was silent. Judge Grant looked at Donovan. Mr. Donovan, do you have anything to say for yourself? The old, frail man looked up. His eyes were watering. I made mistakes, he whispered. I lost my way. I let the pressures, the animals, I let them get to me. I just wanted to clean up the streets. I did what I thought was right. Judge Grant listened. Then she took a sip of water. She set the glass down and she began. Mr. Donovan, she said, her voice quiet, but carrying the weight of generations. You come in here in a wheelchair you do not need, and you speak of mistakes. A mistake is when you dial a wrong number. A mistake is when you spill your coffee. You didn't make mistakes. You made choices. You chose to pervert the sacred trust this nation placed in you. You chose to wield your power not as a shield for the innocent, but as a sword against the vulnerable. You speak of animals. The only animal I see in this courtroom is the one that devours hope. The one that shreds the Constitution, the one that preys on the weak. And that animal, sir, is you. Donovan visibly recoiled. You didn't just lose your way, Judge Grant continued, her voice rising, not in volume, but in power. You bulldozed a new path paved with the lives of the men you framed. You sat on that bench wrapped in a robe that men and women far better than you have worn with honor, and you turned it into a shroud. You framed an undercover federal agent. You were so blinded by your own bigotry, so assured in your own power that you didn't just commit a crime, you committed a stupid crime. You were a dragon, and you were brought down by a man you considered a fly. She looked at her papers. You asked for mercy, the very thing you denied every single man and woman who stood before you. You speak of your heart condition. What of the heart of a mother whose son you sent away for 10 years for a baggie you put in his pocket? What of the heart of a community that you taught to fear the one building that is supposed to be their last refuge? The video of you, she said, in your chambers handing that bag of cocaine to your lackey. That video will be shown in law schools for the next 100 years as a definition of deprivation of rights under color of law. I am sentencing you, Arthur Donovan, to the maximum allowable under the guidelines for every single count to be served consecutively. You are 68 years old. That means your sentence is 120 years. You will leave this courtroom and you will be transferred to a federal supermax facility. You will not be given a private cell. You will be in the general population. You will wear a number. You will die in prison. And when you do, the only justice this court will recognize is the closing of your file. We are done here. She banged the gavel. It was the crack of a whip. As the marshals lifted the now sobbing Donovan from his wheelchair and dragged him from the court, Special Agent Marcus Thorne, watching from the back row, allowed himself a small, grim smile. The fall of Arthur Donovan was not a single event. It was a detonation. The shrapnel from his ruined kingdom tore through the state's legal system, and the shock wave would be felt for decades. His sentencing by Judge Harriet Grant, 120 years in a federal supermax, was the end of his story. A final pathetic whimper as he was wheeled sobbing into a transport van. But for the hundreds of men and women he had crushed under his gavel, it was a beginning. The hard, slow, agonizing work of justice had only just started. The first ripple began with a man named Robert Robbie Hayes. Robbie Hayes had been inmate 1 for 12 years. He was arrested at 22 for possession with intent to distribute, a charge he never understood. He was a line cook, had never touched the stuff, but he'd been pulled over by Officer Peterson for erratic driving, and a search of his trunk, conducted while he was cuffed on the sidewalk, produced a brick of heroin. His public defender, terrified of Judge Donovan, advised him to plead. He's offering 15. The lawyer had said, if you go to trial, he'll give you 50. Robbie, facing a lifetime, took the 15. His daughter was 1 year old. He'd never seen her walk, never heard her first words. Sarah Jenkins, now working as a special investigator for the U.S. Attorney's Task Force, found his file in the second week. It was buried in Donovan's insurance cabinet in a folder labeled Peterson's Triumphs. Attached to the police report was a small handwritten note in Donovan's spidery script. This one will set an example for the Mill Creek crowd. LB owes me one. LB Lawrence Beck, Donovan's crooked lawyer. It wasn't just a plant. It was a conspiracy to frame a random citizen to settle a favor. Sarah flew to the state penitentiary. She met Robbie in a gray cinder block room that smelled of boiled vegetables and despair. He was 34 but looked 50, his eyes were dead. Mr. Hayes, she said, her voice shaking slightly. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm reviewing convictions made by Judge Arthur Donovan. Donovan, Robbie spat the name. Yeah, I remember him. He's the one who sent me here. What's it to you? Do you want to add more time? Judge Donovan has been arrested, Sarah said gently. He's been convicted on 47 counts, including fabricating evidence. We have reason to believe your case was one of them. Robbie stared at her. He didn't move. Don't, he whispered. Don't you come in here with that. Hope is that's a sharp thing in a place like this. You don't play with it. I'm not playing, Sarah said. She slid the note across the table. This one will set an example. Robbie read it. His hands, scarred from prison laundry work, began to tremble. He looked up and for the first time in a decade his eyes focused. A single hot tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek. "You mean we're filing an emergency motion to vacate?" Sarah said. "It's being heard tomorrow. I needed to tell you in person." The next day, Robbie Hayes, in a loose-fitting suit the prison kept for court appearances, stood before a new judge, a federal judge. Sarah Jenkins presented the note. She presented Henry Miller's sworn testimony about how Donovan's insurance stash worked. She presented the evidence that Officer Peterson had been Donovan's street-level enforcer. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Clark, read the file, her face growing darker with every page. She looked at the state prosecutor. "Do you have any argument as to why I should not grant this motion, counselor?" The prosecutor stood. "No, Your Honor. The state has no objection. We apologize." Judge Clark banged her gavel. "The conviction of Robert Hayes is hereby vacated with prejudice. This man's record is to be expugned. He is to be released from custody immediately. Mr. Hayes, you are a free man." Robbie's knees buckled. He fell into his chair, not making a sound, just shaking. Sarah put her hand on his shoulder. "It's over, Robbie. It's over." He was the first. He was not the last. The Gavel Project was born that day in the hallway outside the courtroom when Robbie's 13-year-old daughter, a stranger to him, ran into his arms. Sarah Jenkins watched them, weeping, and made a vow. She would find every last one of them. She resigned from the U.S. Attorney's Task Force and, using seed money from a legal defense fund, opened a nonprofit in a cramped 2-room office. Its sole mission to find and free the victims of while Sarah was building a new world. The old one was burning. The hard karma of the law moves slower than a prison shank, but it cuts just as deep. Henry Miller, Donovan's brutal fixer, learned this firsthand. Stripped of his uniform and his power, he was just another inmate at the federal holding facility, awaiting transfer. He was loud, arrogant, and stupid. He tried to bully other inmates, tried to throw his bafe weight around. It ended in the prison common room over a game of cards. Miller accused another inmate of cheating. Words were exchanged. Miller, used to being the toughest man in the room, shoved the inmate. The man, a lifer with nothing to lose, simply stood up, pulled a sharpened piece of metal from his waistband, and said, "Shoo!" He drove it into Miller's neck, severing his corroded artery. Henry Miller, the man who had gleefully planted evidence to destroy lives, bled out on a sticky linoleum floor, choking on his own blood. His last sight, the bored, impassive faces of men watching a broken television. His end was as meaningless and brutal as his life had been. Officer Peterson, Donovan's nephew, fared little better. He was tried separately. His partner, the one who Donovan had called a coward, was the star witness. He testified that Peterson had bragged about Donovan, taking care of the resisting arrest charge. He testified that Peterson had intentionally and maliciously tripped, then screamed his hand was broken, all as part of a practiced routine. Peterson was convicted of perjury and assault under color of law. The judge, an old-school conservative who despised dirty cops, gave him the maximum 10 years. The last anyone saw of David Peterson, he was in a drab state-issue blue uniform, mopping the floor of a prison mess hall. An older inmate accidentally kicked over his bucket, splashing gray water all over the floor. "Clean it up, pig." The inmate sneered, and Peterson, weeping, did. The most humiliating fate was reserved for Lawrence Beck, the crooked attorney. He wasn't a criminal, not in a way the FBI could pin. His name was on no notes, but he was an unethical lawyer. The State Bar Association, in the wake of the Donovan scandal, launched its own investigation. They found a pattern. Dozens of cases where Beck had taken on a client only to advise them to plead to a deal. Donovan had prearranged. He was in effect a sheepdog herring his own clients to the slaughter for a kickback. His disbarment hearing was a quiet, sterile affair. No grand jury, no dramatic speeches, just 3 aging lawyers on an ethics board. "Mr. Beck," the chairman said, "you have violated the most sacred trust between a lawyer and a client. You are not his shield. You are the judge's knife. This board finds that you are unfit to practice law in this or any other state. You are hereby disbarred. Your license is revoked, effective immediately. Beck, who had built a life of luxury on the backs of framed men, was ruined. His firm collapsed. His partners sued him. His wife left him. He lost his house, his car, his membership at the golf club. 6 months later, a man pulled his Mercedes into a downtown parking garage during a rainstorm. An attendant in a cheap yellow slicker, his face gaunt and unshaven, limped over. "Ticket, sir?" the attendant asked, his voice a whisper. The driver looked at him. "Hey, don't I know you? You're Larry Beck, aren't you?" Lawrence Beck just stared, the rain dripping from his nose. "That'll be $10 for the first hour, sir," he said, holding out a trembling hand. The city of Davidson itself was hemorrhaging. The Gavel Project, in partnership with several major civil rights firms, filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of the 412 men and women who had been wrongfully convicted by Donovan. The number of lives he had destroyed was staggering. 4 to 12 people, an average of 8 years served per person. That was 3,296 years of life stolen. The city council held an emergency meeting. The city attorney, a woman named Chan, stood before them, her face ashen. "We cannot fight this," she said. "The evidence is absolute. Donovan kept records of his crimes. We are liable. The plaintiff's initial settlement demand is $350 million. The mayor choked. "We don't. Our entire city budget is $200 million. "Then I suggest you find it," Chen said. "Because if we go to trial, a jury will award them double that." The city was forced to declare bankruptcy. City services were slashed. Pensions were cut. The backlash was immediate and furious. The mayor was recalled. The chief of police was fired. The entire judicial system of the county was dissolved and put into receivership. As a final symbolic act, the Davidson County Courthouse was stripped of its name. It was renamed the Harriet Grant Justice Center after the judge who had finally brought the gavel down on Donovan. And courtroom 3B, it was gutted. A construction crew was brought in. They tore out the judge's bench with crowbars, the dark wood splintering. They ripped up the carpet stained with God knows what. They tore the seal of the state off the wall. The room where so many lives had been destroyed was brick by brick unmade. It was rebuilt as the courthouse's new public law library. The first book placed on the shelf was a copy of the U.S. Constitution. A year after Donovan's sentencing, the new law library was quiet. In an office building 2 blocks away, the Gavel Project was a hive of activity. The walls were covered with photos. Not mug shots, but real photos. Men at barbecues, women holding their grandchildren. Robbie Hayes, now a case manager, was on the phone walking a newly released man through how to get a driver's license. The door opened and Marcus Thorne walked in. He was in a simple polo shirt and jeans, looking more like a civilian than Sarah had ever seen him. "Agent Thorne." Sarah smiled, standing up from her desk, which was overflowing with files. "Or should I call you Section Chief Thorne? I heard about the DC promotion." "I turned it down," Marcus said, taking the cup of coffee she offered. "Desk job. Not for me." "Somehow I'm not surprised." She laughed. They stood for a moment just listening to the sound of the office. Phones ringing, a man laughing, the clack of a keyboard. It was the sound of lives being rebuilt. "You know," Sarah said, her voice quiet, "I still have nightmares about that courtroom, about him finding me in contempt, that feeling of absolute powerlessness." "He was a monster," Marcus said, "but monsters only have power when they live in the dark. We just turned on the lights." "That video," Sarah amused, looking out the window. "That little camera in your sunglasses, it was the smallest thing. It's almost absurd. All these lives, this whole city changed because of a tiny piece of plastic." Marcus looked at the wall of photos. He saw Robbie Hayes coaching his daughter's soccer team. "It's always the small things, Sarah," Marcus said. "The small acts of defiance, the small, quiet voices that say no. The one person who decides to fight. That's what changes the world." He finished his coffee and placed the empty cup on her desk. "You've done a good thing here, counselor. We're just getting started," she said. her eyes shining with a fire he remembered from the suppression hearing. "But are you just here to say hello?" "No," Marcus said, his expression shifting.